it conflict with your interviews. All right. Uh, if there are no questions, we'll start. Let this recording begin. So let's start looking at uh, some aspects of left recursion. We said that for top-down parsing, left recursion is a problem, and therefore for LL1 grammars or top-down grammars, we will have to remove left recursion, right? And we would like to see a generalized method such that in general, any left recursive grammar, we should be able to uh, remove that left recursion and convert it into, let's say, right recursive grammar. So we say that a grammar is left recursive if it has a non-terminal A, right? So if it is of the form A derives A alpha, right? Where alpha need not be a terminal, it could be a string of non-terminals and terminals, or beta. The important part about beta is that beta does not have A on the left hand side, right? Otherwise it will never end, right? There is no base case. So as we briefly discussed, top-down parsing methods have issues with left recursive grammars because they try to go into the same non-terminal. I'll show you the algorithm and try to identify if a particular production matches the corresponding input token that is coming in, and that can get into an infinite loop. So for example, if I have a statement list as a non-terminal in my parser specification, I can write it as statement list is statement list statement or statement, right? So that becomes a left recursive grammar, which is quite common, although you will not face this problem in the YARC grammar because our YARC generates a bottom-up parser. So bottom-up parsers don't have this issue, but the top-down parsers do have. So let's try to remove that. So what we'll visualize it, and then from visualization we'll change our view of how we are going to look at this derivation, and from the derivation we'll get the way to remove this left recursion. So essentially this means that you can pump A as many number of times as you want, and finally beta is going to appear as the start of the string, right, as the base case. So that means that there are multiple alphas which are preceded by a single beta, right? So that is what this particular diagram shows here. So in the example, this means that if I call this as statement 1 and this as statement 2, right, this can mean that I can have multiple statement 1s, and those need to be preceded by statement 2, right? So statement 2 is a valid derivation, then statement 2 followed by statement 1, statement 2, statement 1, statement 1, and so on. If I have to remodel this, if I have to change the left recursion or get rid of the left recursion, one of the ways in which I can think about it, one of the ways in which I can think about it is essentially looking at it in a different way, where I say that A derives beta followed by B, right? A derives, so here A derives beta followed by B, and then B internally pumps in more and more alphas, right? One small catch here is this part, which is important, which should not be forgotten, that you, in general B can derive epsilon also, although there could have been no epsilon transition, no epsilon possibility or production in the original grammar, because in this case A can derive beta alone. So if I view the grammar in this manner or the derivation in this manner, then I will be able to transform the pattern in a right recursive grammar, which looks like this. So A derives beta B, right? And B derives alpha B, that is multiple alphas, or epsilon. and just quickly look at these two grammars and see if these two are equivalent. So anybody sees any problem with the transformation? I mean, in the sense that are these two grammars generating the same set of strings? Anybody sees any issues with that? Okay, so so we'll say that these are equivalent. Right? In general, you might have multiple such production rules for the same non-terminal, left recursive non-terminal, where you might have a alpha 1, a alpha 2, etc. Right? That those are left recursive parts, and then there are multiple base cases, beta 1, beta 2, etc. So let's say that there are m such left recursive productions and n base cases which do not involve the left recursion. Then a general rule will be, can you tell me what will be the general rule? So A derives something and then B derives something. Right? So that's what I want you to write down. Anyone? Whatever, something is not clear? Okay. Sindhu says beta 1b, beta 2b, beta 3b. Okay. B derives alpha 1, B alpha 2, B or epsilon. Okay. Okay, so all of you have given the same answer. Beta 1, B, beta 2, B. B alpha 1. No, so not B alpha 1. We'll have to change it to alpha 1B, because otherwise it will remain left recursive grammar in B. Yeah, but otherwise this seems to be fine. All right, good. So that is what we will do here. And that gives us a generalized method to convert a left recursive grammar into, in this case it turns out to be a right recursive grammar. Okay. So, I mean, we know the algorithm now that you are able to derive it, but I'll just mention that algorithm and we'll work it out on an example. So what we need to do is to arrange the non-terminals in some order, A1 to AN, let's say, right? And then for each of the non-terminals, each of the non-terminals, A1 to AN, right? So that is going over this. I am going to use the previous AIs, right? So that is the J part, and then replace in AI, right? So if AI is using a previous AJ, then I am going to replace it with AI as beta 1 alpha, right, where it was AJ alpha. Yeah, I have not mentioned what is beta 1, but you get it, right? So this is the baseline productions for that, where that AJ is alpha 1 alpha k are current AJ productions. So those are the AJ productions which we have done so far. And yeah, so there is also one small step which we'll have to do. That is, we have to eliminate the left recursion among the AI productions. So what we are doing is essentially ordering these different AIs and making use of the previous transformations into the next transformation. So making use of AJ in the transformation of AI. Why? I mean, you might feel that this is a little odd, but this is required because you might have a circular loop in the production. So what you can have is that A derives something C, right? Where A is left recursive and it also has, let's say, non-terminal C, and then C might have may not have left recursion, but it might have A in it, right? And that can cause that will force you to put them in a particular order. This is more like the way we do the solving the system of linear equations, right? So we try to eliminate one of the variables, convert, place the right hand side of a particular variable, uh, substitute it in the another equation, and then do it. Similarly, we are going to use aj, which are 1 to I minus 1, the previous ones, into the right hand side of ai. Right? So I'll show one example which will become clearer. Okay, so let's try to do that for the expression grammar. So we have this grammar E derives E plus T or T and so on, and I want to remove left recursion. This is definitely having left recursion, so it is not suitable for, we said that it is not suitable for top-down parsing. So I would like to remove that. So can somebody tell me how this should look like? So again, there will be some people who will be answering the question fast, but that doesn't mean that the others should not try. Please try it out in your copies. There is no problem. Even if you don't say it in the chat box, it's all right. It's more for me to know how much time to give. So please try it out in your copies. You should definitely do this classwork so that it will improve your understanding. And if you face trouble, just either ask in the chat box or mail me later and so on. Okay, we'll go to the previous slide. So remember this E plus T or T, and then T is T star F or F, and F derives parenthesized E name number. Right. So let's go to this part. Okay, this might be helpful. So as soon as you have an algorithm for this, that means that you can mechanically do it. You can code it up as a program, and programmatically you will be able to transform this. So E derives E plus T or T. T derives T star F or F. F derives parenthesized E or name or number. Again, one might ask, why do you need to worry about this left recursion, etc., if the bottom-up parsing doesn't have this problem and we are using bottom-up parsing? Well, all of this, most of the parsing part, you will never encounter in doing YARC, because that is something which YARC is doing internally, right? So, but as a compiler student, you should be able to build this if required. That is the reason why we need to understand the theory behind this. Okay, it's taking time, you guys. So here A derives A alpha or beta. So in this case, A is E, alpha is plus T, and beta is T, right, for E. We might have to apply it again for T because that is also left recursive, but let's focus first on that. So that needs to be converted into beta B, right, where B is a new non-terminal, maybe beta E prime or something like that, where beta is going to be okay. I'll wait for a few. Okay, there are some things. Okay, F for okay, for T it will be F. Okay, E derives TB and B derives plus TB, or epsilon. Okay, E derives TE1, E1 is epsilon or plus T. Hmm. Okay, next it says E derives T or T plus E prime. And, I think there is some problem with that, Nishchit. It might change the grammar. This is T1, even this is plus T1 or epsilon, that seems fine. This is E derives T plus E or T. No, no, no. We cannot. Okay, so Nishchit and Sindhu, this we cannot change the grammar from E to T plus E or T plus E prime. The reason being that this will change the associativity of plus. Right? We would like it to be left associative. In your case, since T will be given priority, T will be given priority, which will still make it. Yeah, that should be okay. E plus T. Uh, T plus E. So it will make it right associative. Plus, whereas in the current grammar it is left associative. So what's happening is that E will replace itself. So E itself can become E plus T, right? So E plus T, that is how it is going to be. Whereas in your case, so that E plus T, the first part is going to be evaluated first because the derivation is going to be top down. Whereas in your case, as soon as it becomes T plus E, that T plus E and that E is going to get replaced with T plus E again. So that right hand side T plus E is going to get evaluated first, and then the left hand side T plus that T plus E. Therefore, the associativity will change. So you will have to be careful about that part. The others seem to be T derives FC, where C derives star F. Or epsilon, E derives star FC, is it? Star F. T derives FC, and okay, C derives star F, C or epsilon. That seems fine. E derives TB, B derives plus TB or epsilon. Seems fine. E derives TE prime. E prime derives plus TE prime. No, that doesn't seem fully correct, Shivram, because this essentially means that E can derive only T plus uh, T. Yeah, actually, it's an endless thing. You will need epsilon there, plus you need two uh, transitions. Right? So essentially, epsilon will give you another transition. Uh, yeah, that will not end. That is correct. FC star FC. Yeah, that seems fine. Yeah. Okay. So all of you have given lots of different answers. Most of them seem correct. There are small issues, but that's okay. I think uh, that will help us learn. The last one remains the same. Yes. The last one need not change because it is not left recursive, so it can remain the same. Correct. Okay, so let's look at that. E derives Te prime, where E prime is deriving plus. So here I'll just explain a little bit because I think some of you face that trouble. This E derives, A derives A followed by alpha, right? And this is our beta. So that we have to convert into beta B. So that is T, that is beta, and B. B is a new symbol. That new symbol I am just marking it as E prime, and that E prime is now uh, alpha, that is plus T followed by B, right? So that alpha B or epsilon. So that alpha is coming from here plus T, and repeated applications of that plus T need to happen, or epsilon, right? And the same thing is applied here also. And if you notice, this is the kind of grammar that we were talking about when we were looking at that, because we want to remove the left recursion. We got some very clumsy grammar. Essentially, that is what was the grammar. So I had promised that after 10 slides, I'll give you a mechanized procedure to convert left recursive grammar to this arbitrary grammar. But definitely, this is not something which we would like to use as a human programmer, because I mean, this seems very unnatural grammar. The first grammar that we came up with is actually a much better grammar because it gels well with what we think. The precedence and associativity, these can be encoded explicitly later. Uh, but of course, the the compiler or the parser will have to do more jugglery in getting that to, sorry, in adding those additional precedence and associativity rules over the grammar. Right? So instead, if we change the grammar ourselves, then definitely it is going to be more efficient, right, from the parsing perspective. But yeah, there is a trade-off between what, because finally the parser is being written by a human. So that, yeah, one small again, some small classwork we would like to do, because now I'm going to have slightly more complication. What I have is S derives something with capital A, and then A also derives something with capital A as well as capital S. Right? So I would like you to think about how to do this, and mostly it will not get into complication if you follow the mechanized procedure, but some students might commit mistake in having this circular grammar, right? So please try that. So it should be understood first that where left recursion is. It is not there in S, at least not there in the first instance of S. So you have to go to A, where there is A deriving AC is the left recursion that you have to remove. As you would have noticed, we are using the small case letters as terminals and capital as non-terminals. But that is just a convention. I mean, in case of Yak and Lex, you can use arbitrarily tokens and non-terminals, capital, small, whatever you want. But it's just that that is the nomenclature. There it's the opposite. The tokens are whatever we are returning from the Lex is in the capitals. Right? So we said identifier or keyword, etc. That we, since we define hash define in capital letters typically, we have defined it as tokens, whereas the expression expr, sentence, one statement, etc. those are in small case, which are actually non-terminals. It's the opposite in the programming part. It's very easy to forget to add that epsilon. So I think that one should definitely remember explicitly. So we discussed about the substitution in system of equations. You might require to think about this particular example in that manner. S derives AA or B, A derives A1 or B AAD or epsilon, B AD A1. Okay. Hmm. A1 derives epsilon or CA1. Okay. Shivram Prasad says S derives A or B, A derives BD, B D A prime or A prime, A prime derives C A prime or AD A prime or epsilon. Uh, okay, these two grammars look different. I mean, you can get different grammars, that is not a problem. In this specific example, likely that different students will get different grammars. But these two, they should be in this grammar. There is something missing. So, okay. I think I'll have to check this. Not able to see which one is correct. Although I'll show the correct one on the slide. But yeah, let me wait for a few more minutes. Yeah, no problem, Venkatasuri. But S deriving A, E or B, that part is fine. A deriving okay, Sarthak and Shivram Prasad got the same grammar. Let me see. S derives A prime, A S prime, B S prime, and S D A prime, A S prime or epsilon. Okay, A derives S D A prime or A prime, S D A prime or A prime. Okay, and A prime derives C A prime or epsilon. Yeah, this also seems fine. I'm just looking at Raghu's grammar. S is okay. A derives B A A D. B. Oh, I see. You have replaced S by A A. Oh, I see. I see. Oh, I see. Okay. So B A A D. Okay. Or epsilon B A A D A1. Yeah, I think there is some problem with that B A A D. I'm not sure if that is correct, but I need to check. The others seem to be okay. Vaibhav has written something. S derives A or B. A derives S dy or y, and y derives cy or epsilon. That seems fine. Okay. All right. So we got some answers and request others also to try out. Yeah, Raghu, I'm not sure about your answer. It might be correct. I just need to check because you have, I think, replaced capital S with the derivations of S, that is A and B. But I have a feeling that there might be some problem. If I'm not sure. Okay, so I'll probably do in a similar manner as some of you have mentioned. Right, so S derives. Oh, actually, I am also replacing that. Okay, so that's good. Then we'll be able to check if me and Raghu have the same answer. So I have also replaced S with whatever are the derivations for S, and that now I have S, everything is in capital A. So S, A, B, that remains as it is. A deriving. So now these two, the first two are left recursive, the last two are our betas. So I have BD, right? So that is the first beta 1, A prime or epsilon A prime. And then A prime is CA prime, AD A prime, and epsilon. Right? Let me check now if Raghu's grammar is the same. A prime, okay. B, D, yeah, there seems to be some difference. I'm not sure if it is the same. And then A prime derives C A prime or AD. Yeah. Do people see that this whatever I am showing on the screen, does it make, is there any mistake in that? Does that seem reasonable? Okay. Yeah, Raghu, no problem. All right. So we talked about left recursion and elimination of left recursion. There is also a small thing here which is sometimes confusing, but it's called left factoring. So when you have in the body of the production, if the first part is common across two productions, let's say A derives alpha B and then alpha C, right? So this alpha turns out to be common. So in this case, you can rewrite the grammar, um, which can be helpful for the top-down parsing. For example, if I, as I was giving the example, A derives alpha beta 1 and or alpha beta 2. So here alpha is going to be common. If you have a top-down parser which just looks at one token look ahead, right, which is what is the typical case, then just by looking at alpha, you might not be able to make a conclusion which production to apply. Right? So in such cases, you can rewrite the grammar such that A becomes alpha A prime and A prime becomes beta 1 beta. This problem occurs only in top-down parsing. This problem doesn't occur in the bottom-up parsing, and we'll study why that happens. So this is just rewriting of the grammar. This doesn't change anything related to the, for example, ambiguity. It does not make the grammar more or less ambiguous. So the grammar power remains the same. It's just that for top-down parsing, it becomes, I mean, instead of LL1, you will have to use LL2 in this case, right, or LLK in general. But yeah, so this can be helpful for the top-down parsing. Okay, so there are some, most of the language constructs that we know are context-free. I mean, as far as the syntax is concerned, but there are some non-context-free constructs which come up, and we should know. I mean, we view them when we study LMC, we view them more like grammars. We don't think about them that how can it be something which is related to programming or related to, let's say, programs. Right? For example, we know that WCW is an example which is not context-free. But that is okay, but do we really use it in the context of, let's say, parsing programs? Right? So if I say that WCW is a language, right, what can that signify in our C programs? Any suggestions? So W is some string, right? Some arbitrary strings, whatever you define. C is, need not be a character, it could be another string. Right? And then W is the same string that was initially checked. Together, this talks about some something when we do the parsing or programming. Can somebody think about that? It's a little abstract question, but I just want to see if somebody gets the clue. And if we can map that particular problem into this WCW form, and since WCW is non-context free, it does mean that that particular program construct or that particular problem, it cannot be solved by a context free grammar. Right? So that is what it will be. So it's actually, let's say I have declarations of some variables, let's say W, right? So the same variable I am using in the declaration. And then there is some program text arbitrarily C, and then I am using that declared variable. So whether I have used a particular variable, not particular variable, whether I have used in general variables in my program, or to flip it, if I am using a variable, then whether it is declared, right, or defined. This problem is not context free. This cannot be specified using the grammar. This requires additional semantic rules. Right? Is this clear what I mentioned just now? Anybody has any questions on that? So undeclared variables or undefined variables or uninitialized variables, these are all problems which sometimes compilers give errors for. These cannot be given during the parsing stage. These have to wait for the semantic phase. Do you do this parsing? Yeah, this has to be done in the semantic checking. This cannot be done in the parsing. I mean, the action part corresponding to the grammar, this action part is an arbitrary, I mean, is whatever you say as Turing complete language. Right? So you can put arbitrary statements there in the action. So with actions, you will be able to get into the context and figure out that some variable is not declared and so on. But just by the context, just by using the context-free language, you won't be able to identify in general for variables. If it is for one particular variable, you will be able to do. If it is for some constant number of variables, you will be able to encode those in the grammar rules. But in general, for arbitrary set of variables which could be user-defined and so on, we cannot solve this problem only using the grammar. We will have to get into the semantic rules. Okay. Any other concerns, questions? Okay. If not, then yeah, so that's what I was mentioning. Then you have to tell me what does this language can mean in the context of programs. So AN, BM, CN, DM. What could this mean? So as you can see, there is a context involved in this, and that context cannot be captured in, of course, the context-free language. Any thoughts on little abstract again, very similar to WCW, but let me see. Constructor, destructor. Why do you say that? I'm not able to see the connection. But N and M is not coming into picture. Okay. So Sindhu's suggestion is arguments for a function. So if I have a function definition and then I'm using it, checking if the arguments match. This could be a very, this can be, so I have multiple such functions, let's say n elements, n parameters, m parameters, k parameters, etc. And then there are function uses, function invocations. That can be nicely modeled using this. Okay, so that seems fine, good. So let's move ahead from here. Let's come to the top-down parsing part. So we are going to spend some time with top-down parsing, but the concepts that we use here, those are also, especially table-based methods, those are going to be useful even in the bottom-up part, because that mechanism is going to remain the same. So what we are going to do in top-down parsing is that we construct a parse tree for the input string starting from the root, right? And then we go on creating the tree below, right? Which is going to be the opposite in the bottom-up parsing. And as we follow this tree, we are going to do a depth first traversal of this tree, and we are going to use the leftmost derivation of this, which is going to give us the LL parsing. So in general, I mean, for very arbitrary kinds of languages which you can think about, or yeah, which you can think about, in general, this top-down parsing, and since it does a depth first traversal, it is also called as recursive descent. In general, it might require us to backtrack. What that means is that I will try to apply a particular production for a particular non-terminal. So for example, our expression is E. I will try to see if E plus E matches or E minus E matches. Right? So that is what I will try. As if E plus E matches, well and good. Otherwise, I am going to go to the next branch and so on. So in case of artificial intelligence, we have this A star search. Not A star search, but let's say in case of games of maze, etc. We try a particular path. If that works, well and good. Otherwise, we go and try the other path. Similar thing you might have studied in the, or you will study in the paradigms of programming, where in the logic languages, there are paths which get blocked, and then you have to follow another path by backtracking, etc. So, and that's also one of the good connections between the logic languages and artificial intelligence. Right? So many game trees get built like this, where you require to backtrack. But so that is a general method for recursive descent top-down parsing. But there is a special case of this, a subset of top-down parsing, where we don't need to backtrack. Right? As long as I am able to well, it's called as predictive parser, but this prediction is not really prediction. It just means that looking at the look ahead, what is the next token that is coming, if I am able to find out which production to apply, then it becomes a clear case of which path to take. So the reason why this is called predictive is because the look ahead is something which you have not yet consumed. So you are in some sense looking at the future and deciding your current course of action. So that is called as, and the number of tokens that you see, that defines how powerful you are. And LLK grammars in general, LL1 grammars in specific, these are non-backtracking grammars, and there is a fixed K element look ahead, K token look ahead corresponding. It's not K characters, These are K tokens, right? Because the parsing does not understand those characters at all. Okay, so let's understand the algorithm for recursive descent parsing. So what we are going to do is that I am talking about a particular non-terminal. This function name A is a non-terminal. So whenever that non-terminal needs to be checked, for example, in our expression grammar, this is going to be E or a starting symbol S. So that is going to start creating the syntax tree or parse tree corresponding to that particular non-terminal. Right? And that is going to, we are going to call it recursively somewhere here, and therefore the name recursive descent. So for yeah, and the backtracking requires us to use some sort of saving of the state. So that is being done using these gray colored statements. Within that, I am going to apply different productions of A, right? This capital A. So capital A might have multiple productions, E deriving E plus T, E deriving E minus T, or T, something like that. So for each such production, there are multiple elements into the production, x1 to xk. I am going to, for each of these elements into this production, that is from 1 to k, I am going to check this if else part, right? And then if that production matches, I will come to that if if that production matches that particular the whole of the xi's, the x1 to xk, then I have found a match and I break. That is, I have found a match and therefore further processing needs to be done. Otherwise, I backtrack, that is, I go to the next hold on. Yeah, so whatever I have consumed so far, that I need to give back, right? Because in applying for a particular production, I might have gone inside some excise to be consumed. So that I need to unconsume, that I need to push back. So therefore, I am going to go back to that saved state and then try for the next production, which might match, which might not match, and so on. So I'll try the next production. Once all of this gets done, so note that this restoring of the state is inside the inner for inside the outer for loop, right? It is not outside the for loop. Saving of the state happens once, but restoring of the state might happen multiple times depending upon how many productions do not match. Yeah, so let's come to this if else part. The if else part says that if xi that I am going to talk about, that is the set of elements in a particular body of the production, if that happens to be a non-terminal, then I need to recursively descend, right? So therefore I am going to call the xi corresponding to that, and this should give you some idea as to why that left recursive grammar will create a problem here, because I am just going to go inside E again and again and again, right? I mean, again, you can stop that, but this is a more plain vanilla version. If xi happens to be the next symbol, that is the coming from the input, then that means that this matches, and therefore I need to advance the input and go to the next xi, I mean xi plus 1. So that is what this for loop is going to take care of as soon as I advance the input. So that means that I have matched 1 to xi, 1 to I, and now I am going to match I plus 1. Otherwise, that is, if it's not a non-terminal, that means it is a terminal, and it is not matching the next input symbol, then this particular production is not going to match. So I am going to unconsume that particular current symbol, and I am going to come out of this loop to try the next particular production. So this is our algorithm for recursive descent, top-down parsing. For example, this is non-terminal A. I might have a rule like this, where for each production, A deriving BC or AA or B. So in x's, in this case, k is equal to 2, then k equal to 2, and then k equal to 1 in these three iterations of this for loop, outer for loop. Then the inner for loop goes over those two elements or one element. And yeah, so this is what. So if the term matches, this is about the token. This is not a term I am using, more like a terminal. Right? So if it's a token match, or if it's a token mismatch, then this YYLS has to happen. A matched is the production match, and if the production mismatches, then we come to the else part, right? So these are the different aspects of recursive descent parsing, and we'll study more of that as we go along. There is some explain current input saved in for loop again. So what I was saying is that as soon as, so we are going over multiple productions here, right? So that saved state needs to be the fresh state. So imagine that when you are going inside BC, the state should be the same. When you are going inside AA, the state should be the same as you had not gone into BC at all. So we save the state before getting into BC, right? So that is our this saving. But if the production does not match, that BC does not match, then I need to restore it multiple number of times depending upon the number of productions that I might have. This is okay? How do we keep track of whether A is matched or not? Yeah, so A is matched or not, yeah, I mean, I have mentioned it only in a verbal style here, but we'll have to build a table which is going to tell us if we have matched it or not. Typically, the productions are going to end with some sort of marker which is going to tell us that, I mean, for simple inputs, for the exposition purpose, we are going to assume that there is some end marker like sharp sign or something which we have used earlier. So if that is there in the input, then we are going to say that it has matched, right? So, and we can set some flag inside the for that. Those are implementation details. But in case of the table driven parsing, we will have some sort of end marker which is going to be used, and if we are in that particular column for that particular end marker, then we will be able to say that we have consumed all the input and we have matched this particular production. So only when, yeah, so I think that is not properly mentioned here. So whenever I do an advanced input, I need to make sure that I increment the number of elements that I have matched in this production. Then only I am going to say that A is matched. This is more like a simplistic version. So you will have to keep track of whether that is matching or not. Any other concerns, questions? YYLS, okay, so YYLS essentially unconsumes the input. You essentially push it back to the input buffer is what you can think about. But essentially that means that you had moved the input pointer somewhere later, you just move it back to the previous input. Or if you have removed it from the buffer, then you have to get it back into the buffer, move this the next part later, and make space for the input buffer. And so YYLS is a function provided by Lex and Yak, which you can use to unconsume an input. So that means that the latest token I am going to read again in the next, when parser asked for whatever you had read earlier, that is going to be read again. So this happens because you are looking at the future, right? You are looking ahead, so you are consuming the next token. And once I have consumed, I found out that, oh, this is not the right token for this particular production, so let me go back, and therefore that YYLS takes care of it. If you assume that YYLS is also happening in the saved state, then you don't need that YYLS also. Okay, any other concerns, questions? Okay, so we'll spend some more time with this top-down parsing in our next class. See you.